How did you find out what happened to your mother, for instance, that she had died?
So anyway, one day out the boat, I don't know what possessed me, but I decided to go down to what's called the births and deaths place here in Dublin. I don't know what possessed me, because as far as I know, I was looking for a dead fella, a dead brother, and I still had that letter. So I went down to what's called the deaths and birth sites, and I had my birth cert with me. That's all I had. And I went in and asked the woman, and I was bawling my eyes, crying, thinking of my mother, thinking of what happened to her. Where was she? And I was crying. I was telling the woman I was looking for a brother. She says, when was he born? I says, I don't know. I know nothing about him. All I know is Christopher Smith. But she says, hey, you can't look for a birth cert, look for someone who has no birth cert. But I says, I haven't a clue when he was born. I've no year. All I know, he was younger than me. She just took down any file that she could think of, any year. And she took up this year herself. I'll show you how to look for it. And she opened up the book. And with that, up comes Christopher Smith Cork. And I gave her my birth cert. And she took the reference number. And she came back and she said, yes, it's your brother. Eileen Smith, but the address wasn't on it. Eileen Smith. I'm born in Besborough. I was born in Besborough. So with that, I said, I'll send that to the Salvation Army, to myself. Now I might find the brother. What happened was, somebody came up to me where I was living, and she said, how about going down to Cork, see can you find your brother? So I didn't know I was going to find Christy. Didn't even know if he was dead or alive, or where he was. So we went down, and as I was going down, in the meantime, she met a man who lives in Newmarket, who went to school with Christy, loved Christy, bawled his eyes crying, when he heard what happened. So he remembered Christy, how much he loved Christy. Christy was in Besborough for 3 years, and Jack Smith was my grandfather, and like that. They said that he got on great with him. So we met when we got off the train in Cork, and we went to a place, and he was telling me what Christy was like, and a phone call come that evening. And he says, don't tell Mary this, but her brother is in a mental home up in the Lee Road. So I was just been in tears after, talking about my mother and not knowing where she was. So anyway, I always had this suspicion now that my mother could be in the Magdalene Laundries and Son as well. So anyway, we had only one day to find my brother and whatever. So we went up anyway up to Sun as well, and this one with the collar, whatever she had, with collar unknown, she said, I remember you coming in here. We had an awful time with you. Oh, we had a terrible time with you. I remember it, she said. Yeah. I said, I never committed any crimes being here, and nobody should have been in here, and that's horrific what you did. You're supposed to believe in God. Yeah. Anyway, I said, I want to know, is there an Eileen Smith here? That's all I want to find out, because your name has changed. And she was, should I have to go for my dinner? So we got around her anyway. And with that night, I went back, and she's waving a paper. And I said, my mother's in there. So she said, your mother is a patient up in the Lee Road. And beside your name was mother, a patient in Lee Road. So then she was directing us up there, which is not far from it. So anyway, we went up there, and after being up there, I asked about my mother. They said, your mother is dead. And then I said, I wonder, is there a Christopher Smith here? And they said, you have been searching, because before I had on the paper, tried to look for him. So with that, they said I was. And with that, they said he's been here for 22 years. They said a farmer brought him in, and he was never certified. And he said, a bit like you, he's very dark. And next thing, the man got keys and went all the way down into a basement. And he was in that basement for 22 years.
Your brother?
My brother was in the basement in the Lee Road for 22 years. And anyway,
was that in Our Ladies or St. Anne's or where?
Our Ladies. The big long grey building.
He was in Our Ladies for 22 years?
In the basement. He was in there at 17 or 18. And I was 43 when I found him. And he was in that basement for 22 years.
Good God.
And he was put in because he was homeless. It's down black and white. He was in there because he was a danger to himself and others, because he was homeless. He took his home off. And when my mother had him, he was to send, a priest gave orders. He was into Cantork Court to be sentenced to death, you might as well say. So he was being Upton and Greenmount. He was in Upton and Greenmount, and then he was sent out to work for a farmer.
So he went, after your mother gave birth to him, he ended up in Upton, Industrial School,
Yeah, and
Greenmount
exactly,
Industrial School, where he was also raped.
Raped. Yeah, he remembers raping him constantly.
He remembers
He had
two
a great
brothers
memory.
raping him. Now you're saying
Absolutely. I had it on tape and unfortunately it's gone. I gave it to the guards. Anyway.
And your poor brother died, didn't he?
So I wasn't going to go down anymore, but we went down anyway. And I was looking for Christopher Smith, the man on the desk. And he said, I remember your mother coming in here. She was only a young girl. And I said, how would you remember he says, I remember the man that brought her in here. And he says, the man that brought her in here used to say, is the room ready for Eileen Smith? I want to get access to her today. Is it ready for her? Get access to her today. The man that brought her in. And there was a glass between the two of us. I said, there's a glass between the two of us. That's a horrific thing to say about my mother. Now, I'm looking back on hindsight, I think what he was telling me now was what he was doing was wrong. And he said, I remember your mother screaming her head off, coming in here. And the man that brought her in, and he said, is a room ready for Eileen Smith to get access to her today?
What does that mean?
To rape her.
And
he raped me as well.
And he did rape you as well, yeah.
That's what he kept saying. That's why he sent that woman down to me.
So this man was raping you and your mother.
Yeah, because he kept on talking about how I looked. He kept on saying, you're getting more like your mother every day, chested like her.
Were you in, just let me get this right, would you have been in the Good Shepherds at the same time that your mother was in Our Ladies?
Yeah, that's it. So I should say, between myself, my mother and my brother were in about 12 lockups in Cork.
And would there have been a chance that you would have been in the Good Shepherds while your mother was in Our Ladies and your brother was also in Our Ladies?
Yeah.
And what happened?
42 and she was 42 when she died.
And why did she die so young? What happened?
Down at birth, had a heart attack. 2 children taken off her. One is only 6. What, a 6-year-old? Could you imagine a child of 6 being taken off you? And then the day she gave birth to me, I'm taken off her.
Eileen, your mother, went into Besborough at the age of 23. At the age of 42, your mother died in Our Ladies, and on the death cert it says heart attack.
Heart attack, yeah.
And where's she buried?
Another thing, a coincidence that happened. I was playing a bit of music because I play music, and I met this man, and he said, I think I know where your mother was buried. And she's buried in Carrickapon and on mass grave.
So you met a man who says, I know where your mother is buried, and he said it was Carrickapon in an unmarked grave.
I was looking for my mother grave. And this guy was playing the guitar, and I knew him. And he says, I know the man, and he buries people that come out in places. So I got in contact. He says to me, I remember burying your mother because she was only young, and it was horrific. And what went on in the hospital. It was horrific what went on in the hospital. So he said to me that up in Carrickapon. So anyway, Christopher, I found him about 15 years ago. But anyway, my brother was moved to Sarsfields Court 3 months after I found him, okay? And when I said, I'll give his name, but you won't say the shrink. And I said, my Christopher, my brother, was never certified. And I says, oh, by the way, I said, where's my mother buried? This is where I found him. And the shrink said to me, your mother is dumped in the grave with the rest of them. Dumped. I was still in the Lee Road at the time.
And those words were used?
By the shrink, yeah. He says to me, get out of this hospital, he says. Get out, he says. And I showed him my mother, my birth cert, and Christy's. And he says, you could be anybody. And I said, so could you. Who are you? I said, tell me, who are you? My brother was never certified, and I want him out of here. He said, you get out of this hospital. You're only causing trouble, and don't come back here again. So I said, he's my brother, and I will come back.
So now we know.
He knew when he met me that I wasn't going to take anything from Mum. I was trying to get my brother out of there, Niall. I was in everything in my power to get my brother out of there.
But
and on his birth, on the files is.
What was it like the first time you met him?
He couldn't have a conversation. He didn't know how to communicate. He didn't know how to speak with people. It took him 5 years to get to know me and who I was. He didn't even know what his sister was. But his memory was something else.
Did you hug him? Did you cry when you met him first?
Oh, it was horrific. Cry, I couldn't stop. I'm crying every day since. The reason why I'm not crying now is because I want to hold back, because I want you doing an interview here with me. And I want to break down crying now.
Yeah.
But didn't anyway. I go down to see Christy, and Christy wasn't allowed food. He wasn't allowed to go to a hospital. His head was cut open. He kept saying, help me, I'm doing my penance. The day before Christy died, which was on 13 years ago, he went from about 18 stone, a big, strong man he was, to 4 or 5 stone. And he was in this lockup out in Sarsfield Court, and there was all windows and doors locked. And he was drugged up to the eyeballs. I was told Christy wasn't to get food. He wasn't allowed out of corridors. There was no ambulance to be called. His head was split open one day when I went down. And Christy just keep on saying to me, help me, I'm doing my penance, help me. And then I used to be ringing up every day, and the window used to be left opened, so his bed would be pushed under the window, so Christy would get pneumonia. Now Christy at this stage, he couldn't hardly breathe, he could hardly walk, the weight was falling off him, he was drugged to the eyeballs, he was in a secure lockup, all windows and doors locked. And he kept saying, help me, save me, I'm dying, I'm doing my penance. And with that, and on 16th of February 07, there was 3 people, on the 15th of February 07, there was 3 people, myself and 2 other people. And I rang my brother, and he couldn't breathe. And the 2 people said, shouting down, get that ambulance. And he says, we're not allowed to. I says, my brother can't breathe, he can't breathe. I said, please get him an ambulance. And Christy said, hold on, Christy, I'm doing my utmost best to get you out of there. I really am. I'm not giving up on you. And he kept saying, help me. So with that, I got a phone call the next day, and he was dead.
Dead. Heartbreaking. So sad. Mother and brother.
That's so bad. And myself as well.
But you tried so hard, didn't you?
I said to point them out in the world, trying hard myself all around the world with help from nobody. I don't know I'm even still alive. I don't know now how I'm still alive to find your mother, your brother.
I know.
In a mental home at the same time.
At the same time, the 3 of you.
I'm suffering every day. She dies. I can't get a minute's peace. The state solicitor, I won't give his name, wrote to the DPP, said there was no one to be prosecuted in my brother's case. And I have photographs now, and if you saw them, you'd see a man alone in the world to save my brother's life.
And where is he buried, Mary?
Carrickabon.
He's buried in the same graveyard as your mam.
Yeah. But all by accident, I found. All by accident. This all happened. I should have never found out about my mother, or I should have never found out about Christy. I'm suffering. My mother's hurt and my brother's hurt. And my own.
Oh no. When there was that apology in the Dáil for those that suffered at the hands of Magdalene laundries and those that suffered as children in industrial schools.
I was the one that started the Magdalene laundries, but it never came out with the Magdalene laundries only for me.
But when Enda Kenny apologised, how did that make you?
Enda Kenny, I met him 8 times. That sounds like he's an old cow. He didn't mean it. I thought at the time, yeah. But apology doesn't rectify anything. Apology doesn't rectify anything. It doesn't go away. It's only a figure of speech.
But at least people were being believed.
I respected that 9. It still makes no difference. There's no one prosecuted. There's no things in then none of them priests and none of them are prosecuted. The man in Rome is not prosecuted. Then there'd be justice.
So would you think that some of the people that were abusive to you, that gave you such a hard, horrible life, that were cruel to you, that beat you, and raped you, do you think that some of them are still alive?
They're still the same organisation.
Yeah.
They're still the same. They're still alive. What's your man in Rome? What's he doing? He's the head of the whole lot of them.
And did your sweetheart settle down and marry?
What happened was he didn't understand why I stopped writing to him. And he did say to me when he was leaving, and I went down to Mallow to see somebody down there one day, and they said to get a taxi. And I was in the house, and he didn't know who I was, and I didn't know who he was. And then when he said, he just squeezed me to death, and he said, I couldn't believe it. He just couldn't believe that was me. And he said, would you tell Billy, I'm going to tell you this, I used to actually deliver into the Magdalene laundries at the same time you were there.
Did he tell you that all those years ago that he loved you?
What he actually said to me when I was in Mallow Station, he said, you'll always be my first love. I'll go to my grave loving you.
Oh, that's so sad. Oh my God, that is just heartbreaking.
And he never drank or smoked. And he was adopted as well.
You had an horrific life. What's life like now?
Life is now.
Yeah.
It's no different. It's no different because anytime I tell anybody about myself, it's in the past, get on with your life. And then they start talking about themselves. I know somebody else has some worse than you or something to that effect. I'm not to talk about myself.
Do you mind me asking, Mary, how old are you now?
Do you know something? It means nothing to me. And what is it, 67, 60, I'm about 68.
Have you ever had any happiness or peace in your 67 years?
No. I don't know the meaning of happiness. I don't know the meaning of love. I don't know the meaning of care. I don't know the meaning of understanding. And I don't know the meaning of life.
I'm so sorry.
I don't know what life is for. His life is just for suffering. I don't know what it's like to be loved. I don't know what it's like to be cared for. No one has ever put their arms around me and said, how are you? It took me a long time for someone to hug me, because I thought if someone hugged me, there was something wrong with me.
I know. But do you have anybody in your life that loves you now?
No. Anybody that I showed care for abused me.
Did you have children yourself?
I was afraid to have kids because that just stuck with me all my life.
Why did you never have children?
That's what I'm telling you. I was afraid in case it'd be taken on me, and I was in bedsitters.
You were afraid that if you had a child, that what would happen to you would be what happened to your mother. Your child would be taken from you.
I was afraid if I got married, if marriage broke up, to take my children. The fear was there all the time, and I love children. I could have had 10 kids if I wanted to. But
yet, every day you get out of bed and you put one foot in front of the other and you carry on.
I can't. I tried to commit suicide loads of times. Right? And the last place I was in the flat up at the top, 6 stories up. I was after taking an overdose, and my flat went on fire the same day, the same night. And don't ask me how I got out, but something happened. That's the reason why I got out. I shouldn't have got out at all, because I was electric blanket went on fire, and I was at the very top 6 stories up. But I had to go to my doctor and say I'm not taking any more overdoses.
And you're not going to take any more. You're going to but you want to live, don't you?
I'm just existing.
You're just existing.
So let's put it this way: I'm existing since I was born. I never lived. I wouldn't call that living. I never really lived. If I never had a mother, if I never had love, if I never had a family, if I never had a home, if I was left without a home, I was left without a family, I was left without a mother, my wife, my husband to be, you guys was taken from me. Everything was taken from me. Before I was 18, whatever age I was supposed to be.
You never ever had a chance on the day that you were born, since before you were born, actually. Nor did your mother before you.
No. And she was 42 and she was dead. Death says she died of a heart attack.
So she never got a headstone? You never managed to find exactly where? No.
No, because the man that said to me, he says, I know for a fact your mother hasn't got a headstone because I buried her. And I remember it very much. And she's been buried in a marked grave.
Do you visit your mum and your brother in Curracapon?
No, I used to, but not anymore. It's too much. It's too much. As a matter of fact, the day I found my mother's grave, where she was. I stayed there for 10 hours. I didn't want to leave. I stayed in the graveyard for 10 hours. Because it was the closest I got to my mother. And I think I felt her there.
You felt her there?
Every time I left Cargapon, I kept coming back. I didn't want to go. Didn't want to leave. I wanted to die there.
You poor thing.
Because it was the closest I got to her.
The closest you got to her was the same graveyard, yeah. When will you get peace? Will you get peace when you're reunited with her?
I don't know anybody should have peace in this world. But
do you believe in the next? I know you don't believe because you're atheist, but But do you believe in an afterlife? No.
I sure do. I could tell you stories what happened since my brother died. I won't go into details over, but things have happened. If I told you, like, what would the chance of me to find out I had a brother? Who sent me down? Who sent me down to what you call it, the birth cert?
Fate. Yeah.
No, but it was all meant to happen because I was going there.
Yeah.
And like it was no coincidence I came to Cork, from Cork to Dublin, and I'm working in a factory. And there were 300 people working in that factory, and we were the only two people from Cork.
But when will you be at peace?
I don't know, Niall. I mean, because every time I find something happens.
And
when I found my brother, I thought this was it. And somebody should be brought to justice for what happened to my brother. Because after all, Niall, he was never certified. He was locked up because he was homeless. They take his home because he's at 6 years of age. And then they lock him up because he's homeless in a mental home. And
tell me, Mary, does talking to me help on the air? Does sharing your story help?
Yeah, but like if people that they would understand, like the hurt that I've been through, and just say, there's plenty more people like you. That's all I get. I know somebody else was in them lockups as well. That's it. I talk about my mother. I got to give you an example. A woman who did the Magdalene laundries with me. She ran me out of the blue one day and said, "You're going on about a woman that you never met your mother. I never met my father. He died." That's what that kind of people. That's what I'm getting, and that hurts me more.
And what would you say to people now, finally listening to this?
What would I say to them?
Yeah.
Well, I would say to them, and if you're in my shoes, you know what depression is. The COVID-19 is nothing compared to what I suffered, my mother suffered, and my brother suffered. And if people talk as well, that they don't see their family before they die, and they wish to see their mothers or their families, and I sympathise that I don't see them, but they're very, very lucky that they have them.
I know.
Imagine left wondering what your mother was like. What's it like to have a family? And they're very lucky that they can go up and look through the windows and see them. I wish I could look up and through the window and see what my mother even looked like. I just sometimes say to themselves, and they're very lucky that they had them, if they can look in the window at them. And then I haven't even got a photograph. I haven't even a photograph of my mother. And Christy and I would have really looked after her. And we would have been so good to her.
You would have been so happy together.
Christy was very kind-hearted. He never mixed with the rest of the inmates. He never mixed with them. He stayed on his own all the time. Never mixed with them.
You would have been so happy. You would have been so happy together as your own little family.
And another thing, Niall, I'm very musical. I can play any instrument under the sun. And Christy could sing every song, any song. You name a song. Christy's been locked up all them years of his life. Any song. He just always say to me, Niall, he always, every time I saw him, he says, "Mary, sweet, I love you." And he says, "And I can't be with you." And he says, "I know that song, Money Can't Buy You Love." And he said, "That's my song to you, Money Can't Buy You Love, Mary, sweet, and I love you. And I can't be with you." Every time he went down to this, and he'd squeeze me and wouldn't let me go. The last time I went down, one of the people working there had to pull me away from him. He was wearing nappies and everything. It was a skeleton. He kept saying, "Save me, save me, save me," every ambulance I got.
It's a horror story. It's a horror story from start to finish.
It's just bad enough what happened to my mother, and then me, and then Christy.
And of course, you're still alive to continue and to.
Unfortunately, I often say it's a pity to kill the three of us, and not to who gave them the authority to take my mother. If they were, because she was an unmarried mother, well then the father should have been locked up as well.
I know. I know.
And how many, apart from that, how would they like for the church and state, for anybody to do that to them? You only get one chance at this world. You've only one mother and one life.
It's not a rehearsal.
It's not a rehearsal.